You don't know how to carry. Probably. Most players Diamond and below don't know how to truly convert their massive leads into guaranteed victories. And the reason why most players fail at this is actually really simple. They don't think about how their actions make their opponents feel, and instead just focus on what benefits them. Every top lane main here has fallen behind horribly before, and you know exactly how it feels to be unable to do anything to come back. This is precisely how you carry. Not by tunnel visioning on what you want, but making the game feel absolutely hopeless for your opponent. To do so, you really need to understand your opponent's perspective when you have a lead. Thankfully, we've got Hector turbo-inting into a gold platinum elo Tryndamere. Not on purpose, mind you, he just randomly got extremely outplayed. Then, he misplays and feeds yet another kill into Tryndamere. And at this point, he is very tilted, and is just running it down as quickly as humanly possible. Again, somehow this is not on purpose. But this is good for us, since it helps us to teach the exact concept that you need to learn to translate more of your in-lane leads into game victories. Top lane is the most snowball role in the game by far. If you get a massive lead in top, you are almost guaranteed to win if you play properly because your role is extremely overpowered when you're ahead. And that is the 6th death in a row Hector hands this Tryndamere. But you are now going to see how he fails to capitalize on this lead, and the game goes from looking doomed to another easy comeback win in gold. For this guide, we won't be looking at how Hector played properly to come back. Instead, we'll be focusing on Tryndamere's actions through Camille's perspective, so that you can see exactly how your opponent actually feels on the back foot when you're the one with the lead. With this process, you will see a ton of things that you're not doing as a top laner, which stops you from carrying games, and the preseason is the best time to fix that. When you're playing to improve, instead of playing just for LP, you'll tend to lose more than you win to begin with. Then, after a bit of time, you'll get much better and start winning far more games. So, let's get back into the guide. Let's go ahead and rewind back to Hector's death number 5, because here is where we can immediately see Tryndamere not applying the previous goal of making your opponent's life hell. While Tryndamere hits the tower and gets some turret plates here, let's see if you know how to properly snowball this lead. What would you do right now as Tryndamere to make this game feel absolutely hopeless for Hector? If you're thinking about zoning him off by going in between towers, well done. When you've got a massive lead and you're playing a champion with wave clear and or sustain to tank minion waves, then you really need to be abusing this tactic. If you position in between the towers, your opponent literally cannot get back to lane for free, and this will tilt them into oblivion. Not only are you getting ahead in gold, but also experience, which is way more valuable during the early game. And if you've set up vision control prior to this, then you can even see when you're being collapsed on and just get away regardless, which wastes a ton of your opponent's time. Back to this Tryndamere, he has plenty of sustain and wave clear in his kit to tank minion waves, and could have just set up here to zone Hector. If Camille tries to cross, he does like 1/2 her HP as she goes back to tower. And at this point, Tryndamere has both ult and flash available. He could easily dive after that, putting Hector extremely far behind. Instead, he tunnels on getting this turret plate way too much. Think about it like this. If he zoned Hector off a single wave, that denial would have been worth more than an entire turret plate. And it's not like Tryndamere can't get the plate afterwards anyway. This is the first example of what we've discussed. Most players are so absorbed in what they can get for themselves, rather than trying to make the lives of their opponents miserable, leading to lost opportunities like this one. Of course, thankfully for Tryndamere, as we've already seen, Hector did not make good use of this generosity and instead just died to him again, which brings us to this next point in the game. One of the best ways of catching up in League is by just sitting in a side lane and trying your best to absorb and push every wave possible. But as all of you who play Camille know, trying to interact with waves when you're behind as Camille is one of the most depressing things in the entire game. So Hector, instead of pushing, is just freezing top. He has literally zero agency this game and is just praying for a miracle. As a side note, remember that there are tons of top laners who have really bad wave clear when they're behind, who you could abuse in a similar way. Now, so far, Trynd has been merciless abusing this advantage. Camille can't do anything at the moment, and by the time Hector realizes that Tryndamere is pushing in mid, he arrives way too late to defend his own tower. While here, Hector just stares Tryndamere down, kind of baiting him into a fight. Eventually, Trin is going to take the bait and E into Camille. Now, here's a question. Why is this the wrong thing to do? So, the minimap bait may have gotten some of you to overthink this when the answer is really quite obvious. Camille still has E up, which means that there's no kill opportunity here. We'll come back to that, but let's just watch the result of Trin's mistake. Lux lands a great binding from the Fog of War, forcing him to ult. Now Hector can just swoop in and get his first massive shutdown of the game. Now, the issue isn't how Tryndamere got outplayed here, but him failing to follow a super simple concept when you're winning, especially this far ahead. To make it clear, he was up 4k gold, literally more than double the total gold of Hector at this moment. His time is way more valuable than Hector's time. Think about it. At the pace that Camille could clear a single minion wave when this far behind, Tryndamere could probably farm an entire lane and a whole quadrant of a jungle. When you're ahead, you don't trade your time evenly with your opponents. So, Tryndamere being baited around here is precisely what Hector wants. Keeping Trin preoccupied, doing nothing instead of just taking wolves and Gromp is throwing his lead ever so slightly. If Tryndamere had followed this principle to begin with, he wouldn't have ever been in this position and thrown a big shutdown. That is the main takeaway here. Anyway, after respawning, Tryndamere heads top. Because Hector literally can't push a wave to save his life, Trin has time to farm up some Krugs before going to catch the wave Hector couldn't crash. Again, this game should be very easy to win by exploiting Camille's wave clear. As he pushes, Trin can see Hector move from mid toward top, indicating that he's moving to defend the tower. Tryndamere farms Gromp and then moves over to cut off Camille. Let's stop for a second to remember this moment. This is a huge error on Tryndamere's part, but let's watch what happens first before getting to that. He E's after Hector and begins an all-in. Hector is eventually forced to flash away desperately to try and live. Tryndamere decides to chase through the tower, but barely doesn't get the kill and hands over yet another shutdown. The mistake was his macro. The problem with Tryndamere is a common issue so many low elo players face, which is that you are making the game way too simple for your opponents. Hector should be feeling extremely frustrated right now, but he's not. In fact, this was a very simple situation for him to maneuver. Looking back at this moment, why is Tryndamere cutting Hector off? In fact, you can even tell Hector is a bit caught off guard by the fact that he's here by the way he reacts. You see, there's no reason to be here. Yes, he's cutting Hector off, but it's not actually pressure. That's because of the fact that Tryndamere hasn't crashed the wave. Therefore, Hector is in no rush to get to his tower. In fact, he could have just wall hopped here to get around Tryndamere, or gone the long way around like so because he can take his sweet time getting there. The only reason there was even a kill opportunity present is because Hector omega disrespected this Tryndamere with his pathing and E angle. Maybe 6 deaths isn't enough to learn a lesson. Ultimately, the main criticism of Tryndamere is that the situation he's put Hector in is super chill and not real pressure. Now imagine this instead. After Gromp, he pushes the wave in. He may be unable to cut Hector off still, but now he just takes the entire topside jungle that's still up. Then he collapses over to mid or dragon or whatever is happening in bot. Meanwhile, there is literally nothing Hector could do about that. It doesn't matter that he's a challenger player with every macro trick in the book. Just by pushing that single wave, Tryndamere would have made this game completely hopeless and unplayable for Hector. But he is so tunnel visioned on feeling big and strong that he fails to see the simple game-winning play. We're about to see a very similar issue on the next play Tryndamere goes for. When he respawns, he pushes out top and rotates to begin the Rift Herald. This is fine so far, but he notices Diana engaging a fight around blue buff. Quick question, do you rotate to this fight? Yes or no? The answer is a definite no. To understand why, let's once again look at this from Camille's perspective. Hector spots Diana coming into flank Lux and tries to warn her. Right now, he's not thinking of this as a comeback opportunity, he just thinks his mid is inting another death. However, notice that he's hovering in the area. This is because there is no pressure anywhere. No waves are being pushed in that he needs to grab. So he's not losing anything by just standing here and patiently seeing if something might go well. And look at how he plays this fight. He cautiously walks up without committing E and just uses W. Then he autos and is even prepared to kite back right after it. In his mind, this Tryndamere can still 1v3 the fight, so he doesn't want to commit just yet. The following is just game sense that we don't necessarily expect you to learn. We're just seeing Hector's real-time thought process right now. You can notice that the second he sees Tryndamere's E animation, that he knows he's going to E flash and try to kill Lux. Only now does Hector fully commit, knowing that Trin has overcommitted and is throwing the fight. By killing the isolated Diana and then kiting out Tryndamere, he picks up yet another 2 big comeback kills. Looking back at this moment, Tryndamere should know his best decision is to just let Diana back off or die alone. There's not enough pressure on the map to warrant a 2v3 even with their lead. However, for argument's sake, let's say those mid and top waves were actually pushed. Then Tryndamere should invade with Diana. Remember, Hector only stuck around because there was no reason for him not to. He didn't think the fight was initially good, as you could tell by how he played it. If there were waves at his tower, he likely would have said, "Goodbye Lux, I gotta farm." Or if he commits to protecting his team, Tryndamere and Diana then have the option of just baiting around and wasting their time while Hector and crew miss a ton of farm to the towers. You see how having a wave pushed makes the situation way more impossible and annoying for the blue team? That is how you want to play it. For the last time, contrast that to how it actually looks from Hector's POV right now. Doesn't this look super simple and easy to maneuver? He has all the time in the world to decide whether this is a good or bad fight and make a proper choice. For all the chances this poor Tryndamere had to win this game. At this point, Hector is strong enough to just pop off as any challenger would with the slightest advantage, and there's nothing Trin can do to stop him at this point. Remember that as a top laner, when you have a lead, the game should feel impossible for your opponents, and this should be the main thing that you practice every game that you have an advantage. And in your reviews, don't just look at your own perspective, but try to look at how your opponent probably felt playing against you as well. Think about what would have annoyed them the most and made them miserable. Do so and you'll improve far more rapidly.